Officer, I'm not raising my voice. I'm asking what I have done wrong. This is the last moment of transcontinental airways. They just don't know it yet. The woman they are about to drag off this flight is Dr. Imani Hayes. She's a first-class passenger. She's a respected CEO. And she's the deciding vote on a $5 billion corporate contract this airline is desperate to land. They thought they were removing a problem. They had no idea they were grounding their entire company. This isn't just a story about profiling. It's a 10-figure lesson in what happens when you disrespect the wrong person. The cabin of Transcontinental Airways Flight 1109 from San Francisco to New York was a pressurized oasis of forced calm. In Seat 2B, Dr. Imani Hayes was in her element. The first-class cabin was her second office, a quiet pod 6 miles high where the final, intricate details of massive deals were ironed out. Imani was not just successful, she was a force. At 42, she was the founder and CEO of Hayes Vanguard Capital, a private equity firm that had, against all odds, become a global leader in sustainable technology and green infrastructure investment. She managed a portfolio that made nations nervous. She was dressed in a dark gray Tom Ford pantsuit, her laptop open. On the screen was the final draft of an agreement worth a staggering $5 billion. It was a dual-purpose deal, a 5-year exclusive corporate travel contract for her entire 20-company consortium, and a joint venture to fund TCA's new, highly publicized Green Wing initiative, using biofuels her firm specialized in. TCA's CEO, Richard Sterling, had been courting her for 6 months. This flight was a mere formality before she landed at JFK to sign the papers. The pre-departure rituals began. Coats were taken, drinks were offered. "Ma'am, can I get you something before we push back?" The voice belonged to Brenda Jenkins. Brenda was a senior flight attendant, a 30-year veteran with a rigid smile and eyes that held a lifetime of petty judgments. She had already sized up Imani. She saw a black woman in a seat that, in her mind, was usually occupied by white men in wrinkled shirts. "Just a sparkling water with lime, please," Imani said, her eyes never leaving the contract's indemnity clause. "Sure thing," Brenda replied, her tone a half-second too slow, a fraction too saccharine. 5 minutes passed. The man in 2A, a tech bro in a hoodie, got his whiskey. The woman in 1D got her champagne. The cabin door was about to close. Imani, still deep in her work, hadn't received her water. She looked up and saw Brenda chatting with another crew member in the galley. Imani pressed the call button. Brenda reappeared, her smile now visibly strained. "Buttons on?" she snapped, not waiting for an answer. "Hi, Brenda," Imani said, her voice quiet but firm, pointing to the name on her apron. "I just love that water if you have a moment. We're about to take off." Brenda's face tightened. This was to her an act of impatience, an unearned demand. "We are very busy during pre-boarding, ma'am. I'll get to it when I can." She turned to leave. "Ma'am," Imani said, stopping her. "I'm sorry, but that response isn't acceptable. Your colleague just served 2 other passengers. I'm just asking for a water." This was the breaking point. For Brenda, this wasn't a customer service complaint. It was a challenge to her authority. "You need to lower your voice," Brenda hissed, though Imani hadn't raised it. The cabin went quiet. The tech bro in 2A looked up from his phone. "I am not raising my voice," Imani said, closing her laptop. She was no longer a CEO. She was a passenger being disciplined. "I am making a simple, polite request." "I don't like your tone," Brenda said, her voice rising. "You're becoming agitated. I'm not going to serve you if you're going to be aggressive." Imani stared, stunned. The audacity of the gaslighting was breathtaking. "Aggressive? I asked for a water. You are the only one here who is agitated. That's it, I'm not having this." Brenda marched to the front. "You're a non-compliant passenger. I'm reporting you to the captain." Imani felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She knew this script. She had seen it play out for others, but never, not in first class, had it been directed at her. "This is absurd," Imani said to the man in 2A, who quickly looked away, suddenly fascinated by the safety card. 2 minutes later, Mark, the gate agent, appeared at her seat, flanked by Brenda. "Ma'am," Mark said, clipboard in hand, "my flight attendant, Brenda, has informed us that you are being disruptive and creating a hostile environment for the crew." "Mark," Imani said, her voice dangerously calm, "I assure you nothing of the sort has occurred. Your flight attendant refused a simple service, and when I questioned it, she accused me of being agitated. I am sitting in my seat. I am not a threat, I am a first-class passenger." Brenda, standing behind him, smirked. She was yelling. She was pointing her finger in my face. It was a blatant, shocking lie. "That is false," Imani said, her blood turning to ice. "Absolutely and demonstrably false. Ask the passenger next to me." Mark looked at the man in 2A. The man shrugged. "I don't know, man. I was listening to my music. She seemed kinda loud." Imani felt the floor drop out, the silent betrayal of the bystander. "See?" Brenda said, triumphant. "Ma'am," Mark said, his voice hardening, "the captain has been informed. He's not comfortable having you on his flight. We're going to have to ask you to deplane." "No," Imani said. It was a simple, flat, complete sentence. "I am not leaving my seat. I have done nothing wrong. You are discriminating against me." "Ma'am, if you don't deplane voluntarily, I will have to call airport security," Mark threatened. "Then you call them," Imani said, pulling out her phone, "because you are going to have to physically remove me. And I want you to know this will be the most expensive mistake Transcontinental Airways has ever made." Mark scoffed. "Is that a threat, ma'am?" "No," Imani said, hitting record on her phone and aiming it at her own face, then panning to Mark and Brenda. "It's a balance sheet forecast." Mark's face went pale. He turned and walked off the plane. "He's calling them," Brenda whispered, a look of vindictive glee in her eyes. "You're in real trouble now." Imani simply held her phone, recording, as the heavy, unmistakable tread of boots approached the aircraft door. The arrival of the police shifted the cabin's atmosphere from awkward silence to a thick, voyeuristic tension. Every passenger was now an audience member. Phones, previously hidden, emerged like periscopes. 2 officers from the San Francisco Airport Police Department boarded the plane. The first was a stocky man in his late 40s, his name tag reading Russo. He had the weary, cynical look of a man who dealt with airport drama daily and had long since lost his patience for it. His partner, Miller, was younger, taller, and looked profoundly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," Officer Russo said, stopping at her row. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't investigate. He was there for a removal. "Officer," Imani said, her voice steady, her phone still recording, though now pointed at the floor to capture audio. "I am Dr. Imani Hayes. I am a ticketed first-class passenger. I have been falsely accused of being disruptive by that flight attendant." She motioned to Brenda, who was watching from the galley, "after she refused to serve me." "Ma'am, I don't care about the water," Russo sighed, his hand already on his belt. "The captain wants you off the plane. The flight crew has final say. That's the law. Now, are you going to walk off? Or are we going to make you walk off?" "I will not walk," Imani stated. "I have broken no law. I have violated no policy. I am being removed because your employee lied, and you are all accepting her lie without a single question. This is racial profiling. It is discriminatory, and it is illegal." The word racial profiling hung in the air. Russo's face darkened. "We're done talking," he said. He nodded to Miller. "Let's go." "Sir, wait," Miller said, looking at Imani, who was composed, articulate, and in no way resembled the agitated passenger described. "Maybe we can just talk on the jet bridge." "No," Russo snapped. "We're not negotiating. We're clearing the aircraft." He lunged forward, grabbing Imani's arm. Imani recoiled, a sharp gasp escaping her. Not from pain, but from the sheer violation. "Do not put your hands on me. You're assaulting an officer," Russo yelled, though she had only pulled her arm back. This was the signal. He grabbed her left wrist, hard. Officer Miller, hesitant but now obligated, took her right. I am not resisting, Imani said, her voice rising in genuine alarm as they began to haul her bodily from her seat. You are assaulting me. Her laptop, still on the seat, clattered to the floor. The man in 2A flinched away as if she were contagious. This is unbelievable, Imani said, trying to maintain her footing as they dragged her into the narrow aisle. Her suit jacket twisted, her shoe came off. The other passengers were statues of shock and silent judgment. A few phones were out, their red record lights glowing in the dim cabin. The shame was a physical weight, hot and suffocating. She was being paraded through the very cabin she was supposed to command, treated like a criminal. Brenda Jenkins watched from the galley, her arms crossed, a small, tight smile of pure victory on her face. As they manhandled her through the main cabin, a man in row 12, a white man in a baseball cap, said, "Shame on you. She wasn't doing anything." Russo didn't even turn. "Mind your business, sir, or you're next." They pushed her onto the jet bridge. The metal walls amplified the sound of the radio static and her own heavy breathing. The door to the plane hissed shut behind them, a final metallic punctuation mark on her humiliation. Imani stumbled, catching herself on the railing. Her left wrist was already blooming with a dark purple bruise where Russo had gripped her. Russo pulled out his notepad. "Interfering with a flight crew. That's a federal offense. I could arrest you for that." Imani straightened her jacket. The mask of the victim fell away, and the face of the CEO returned. Her eyes were not filled with tears. They were filled with a cold, clear, calculating fire. "Officer Russo," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Badge number, please." He scoffed. "It's 4491. "And yours, Officer Miller?" Miller, looking at the floor, muttered, 3107. "Thank you. Now, Officer Russo, I am not filing a complaint. I am informing you that I will be filing a civil rights lawsuit against the San Francisco Airport Police Department and you personally for assault, and against Transcontinental Airways." Russo laughed. "Yeah, okay. Get in line. You can talk to the airline supervisor at the gate." He and Miller turned and walked back toward the terminal, leaving her alone on the jet bridge. Imani stood there for a full minute. The sound of the plane's auxiliary power unit hummed. She picked up her phone. She stopped the recording and saved it. She looked at the closed aircraft door. Inside, Brenda Jenkins was probably serving champagne, believing she had won. Imani Hayes, CEO of Hayes Vanguard Capital, fixed her hair, slipped her shoe back on, and took a deep breath. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a creditor. And Transcontinental Airways was about to file for moral bankruptcy. The financial part would come later. She walked into the terminal, not to the customer service desk, but to the quietest corner she could find. She dialed her chief legal officer. "David," she said, her voice like steel, "scramble the board and get me the CEO of Aerosphere Airlines on the phone. We are moving the entire consortium, effective immediately." The terminal at SFO was buzzing, but Imani Hayes moved through it like a ghost. The normal chaos of Gate B22, the crying babies, the anxious final call passengers was just white noise. Her mind was already in a war room, 30,000 feet above the problem. She found a quiet alcove by a closed Hudson News and made 2 calls. The first was to her chief operating officer, Marcus. "Marcus, it's Imani. We have a situation. I've been removed from TCA 1109. "What? Removed? Are you okay? Did you get sick?" "I was assaulted by their crew and the airport police," Imani said, the words tasting like ash. "Listen to me. The $5 billion contract, the Green Wing Initiative, it's dead. Pull it. I want a press release drafted in 1 hour announcing that Hayes Vanguard is reevaluating its strategic partnerships due to a severe misalignment of corporate values and safety protocols. Don't name TCA yet. Just create the shadow." Imani, $5 billion. The board approved it. Sterling is expecting the signature tomorrow. "The board," Imani said, her voice dropping, "will approve its termination when they see the video of their CEO being dragged out of a first-class seat. This company is a systemic risk. Their culture is a liability. It just cost them $5 billion. Now do it." Marcus, knowing that tone, simply said, "Yes, ma'am. I'll draft the release. What's your next move?" "My next move," Imani said, "is to call James Thatcher." The second call. James Thatcher was the CEO of Aerosphere Airlines, Transcontinental's biggest and most bitter rival. The two men, Thatcher and TCA's Richard Sterling, despised each other. It was 4 p.m. in Chicago, where Aerosphere was headquartered. Thatcher would be in his office. He picked up on the second ring. "Imani, this is a surprise. I thought you'd be halfway to New York by now, on one of Sterling's planes." Thatcher's voice was jovial, but with a sharp edge. "Hello, James. Funny you should mention that," Imani said, walking over to the window, watching Flight 1109, her flight, finally push back from the gate. "I had a change of plans. How quickly can you and your legal team handle a new, very large, very exclusive contract?" There was a pause. The humor vanished from Thatcher's voice. "How large?" $5 billion, give or take, full corporate travel consortium, and a 10-year exclusive partnership on a sustainable fuel initiative. It's the entire package TCA was bragging about in their last quarterly report. Imani could hear the sound of a chair squeaking as Thatcher sat bolt upright. "You're serious? What happened? I thought you and Richard were signing tomorrow." "Richard's team just defaulted on the human decency clause," Imani said. "I'm at SFO. I've just been forcibly removed from Flight 1109 by 2 police officers, at the request of a flight attendant named Brenda Jenkins, because I asked for a glass of water. I have it on video. I have the bruise on my wrist to prove it." Thatcher was silent for a full 10 seconds. He wasn't processing the injustice. He was processing the opportunity. It was the corporate equivalent of an enemy's fortress suddenly, inexplicably, lowering its drawbridge and raising a white flag. "Imani, my God. First, are you all right?" "I'm fine, James. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm looking for a partner who can guarantee the safety and respect of my employees, from the mailroom to the CEO." "You'll have it," Thatcher said, his voice now electric with predatory focus. "My entire C-suite will work through the night. Send me the TCA contract. We'll match every term on price, and we'll beat them by 20% on the fuel sourcing guarantee. And Imani, we'll add a dignity and respect clause with 7-figure penalties for any breach, reviewable by your own team. We'll put your logo on the side of the first plane we retrofit." "That's a good start," Imani said. "I need your private hangar at SFO. I need a jet to New York. Tonight. I'll have a Gulfstream waiting for you in 45 minutes, Thatcher said. "Tango 7 Alpha is yours, my personal pilot. Send me the video. My PR team will want to have it, just in case Richard Sterling tries to spin this." "He will," Imani said. "He'll say I was unruly. It's the standard script." "It won't work," Thatcher said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Not when the unruly passenger is holding $5 billion of his company's future in her hand. One more thing, James," Imani added. "Anything. I want Brenda Jenkins's employee file, and Officer Russo's. I want to know who they are. My security team is already on it. Imani, welcome to Aerosphere." Imani hung up. She looked at her reflection in the terminal glass. The exhausted, humiliated woman from the jet bridge was gone. In her place was a predator. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was an alert from the TCA customer service app. "We are sorry for the disruption to your travel. As a gesture of goodwill, we have added a $200 travel voucher to your account. We value your business." Imani stared at the notification. $200. She laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that startled a man sleeping on the seats nearby. They thought her dignity, her safety, and her humiliation were worth a $200 voucher. She took a screenshot of the offer. She forwarded it to her legal team. "Add this to the damages," she wrote, "and find me Richard Sterling's personal cell number." The interior of the Aerosphere Gulfstream G650 was not just luxurious, it was a mobile command center. As the jet climbed to 40,000 feet, leaving San Francisco and Transcontinental's jurisdiction far behind, Imani Hayes was already at war. She had connected to the high-speed Wi-Fi, a glass of sparkling water, delivered with prompt professionalism by the Aerosphere pilot, untouched on the polished wood table. Her team was assembled on a secure video conference. Marcus, her COO, David, her chief legal officer, and Sarah, her head of communications. "Okay," Imani began. "David, status." David, a sharp man with a mind like a steel trap, adjusted his glasses. "Imani, this is staggering. The discrimination suit is clear-cut. The assault claim against Russo is solid. The video is damning. But pulling the $5 billion deal, Imani, are we sure? TCA is going to claim breach of contract. They'll say we terminated on a pretext." "A pretext?" Imani's voice was dangerously low. "David, they put their hands on me. They dragged me off a plane for nothing. That isn't a pretext. It's a material breach of the covenant of good faith and fair dealing. This isn't just my travel. This is the travel of over 50,000 employees in our consortium. What happens when they do this to a junior analyst from our portfolio who doesn't have my resources? What happens when they pull a black engineer off a plane and he does get arrested? We cannot, as a company, fund an organization with a corporate culture that's permissive of racial bias. It is a fundamental risk to our people. Frame it as a failure of their fiduciary duty to provide a safe environment. They failed. The deal is void." Marcus chimed in. "She's right, David. And I've been doing the numbers. TCA is leveraged to the hilt. They were counting on the Green Wing initiative. They took out bonds against the projected revenue from our contract." "Good," Imani said. "They bet the house on our signature. Now they can deal with the consequences of their actions." "Which brings us to PR," Sarah said, her face grim. "Imani, a passenger video is already on Twitter. It's shaky, but it shows you being pulled into the aisle. The caption is, 'Crazy lady gets kicked off SFO flight.' The narrative is already forming against you." Imani had expected this. "This is where we cut them off at the knees, Sarah. I want you to do a controlled release, not just my video. I want a package. 1. The unedited 10-minute audio from my phone. Let them hear me being calm. Let them hear Brenda's lie. Let them hear Russo's aggression. 2. A high-res still of the bruise on my wrist. 3. A screenshot of the $200 Goodwill voucher they sent me after the assault. 4. The official statement from Hayes Vanguard, announcing the immediate termination of the $5 billion partnership negotiation with Transcontinental, citing a catastrophic failure in passenger safety and corporate oversight. 5. Simultaneously, you will release a joint statement with Aerosphere announcing our new long-term partnership." Sarah's eyes went wide. "That's not a press release, Imani. That's a kill shot. The market will open to a bloodbath for TCA." "They drew first blood, Sarah, not me," Imani replied. "They humiliated me in public. I will dismantle them in public. I want the package sent directly to Julia Kent at the Wall Street Journal and Allison Pham at Bloomberg. Give them the exclusive. I want this story told not as an airline dispute, but as a financial cost of racism story. I want every CEO who has ever dismissed a discrimination complaint to see this and recalculate." "It's ruthless, Imani. I love it," Sarah said, her fingers already flying across her keyboard. "We'll time the release for 6 a.m. Wall Street time, just before the opening bell." "Perfect," Imani said. "Now, David, I need you to find Richard Sterling. He's probably at home, enjoying a cocktail, completely oblivious. He needs to hear from me, not from the Wall Street Journal." "I have his personal number," David said, a grim smile forming. "He's not going to be happy." "He's about to be the least of his concerns," Imani said. She looked out the window at the dark expanse of the American continent passing below. This was no longer about a flight. It was about power. Brenda Jenkins thought she had power over a passenger. Officer Russo thought he had power over a civilian. Richard Sterling thought he had power over a vendor. They had all forgotten that in the world of capital, the one who signs the checks holds the only power that matters. Her phone buzzed. It was a secure text from James Thatcher at Aerosphere. It contained 2 attachments. The first was a heavily redacted internal file. Brenda Jenkins. Employee, 31 years of service. It included 14 passenger complaints in the last 10 years, 9 of which cited rude behavior or aggression. 3 of those complaints were from non-white passengers. All were dismissed by her union rep. The second file was even darker. Officer Frank Russo, SFAPD, 18 years. A list of 8 civilian complaints for excessive force and verbal abuse, 2 of which had been settled out of court. They hadn't just mistreated a CEO. They had unleashed their 2 most toxic employees on her. "Send those files to David, too," Imani said to her team. "Add them to the lawsuit. I want a pattern of negligence. TCA knew Brenda was a problem. SFAPD knew Russo was a problem. They are all liable." She disconnected the call, leaned her head back, and finally closed her eyes. The righteous anger was fading, replaced by a cold, surgical focus. The plane, her new, private, respectful plane, flew on through the night. The storm was about to break. Richard Sterling, CEO of Transcontinental Airways, was clinking glasses with his wife at their Connecticut estate. They were celebrating. The $5 billion Hayes Vanguard deal was, in his mind, already signed. It was the crowning achievement of his career, the move that would secure his legacy and, more importantly, his $25 million end-of-year bonus. His personal cell phone, the one reserved for his board members and his golf buddies, rang at 8:30 p.m. The name on the screen was David Leone, Hayes Vanguard CLO. "Strange," he answered, a genial, booming laugh already prepared. "David, to what do I owe the pleasure? Getting some last-minute details hammered out before Imani signs tomorrow?" "Richard," David's voice was flat, cold. "I'm patching in Dr. Hayes. She needs to speak with you directly." "Imani?" Sterling was confused. "Shouldn't she be in the air?" The line clicked. "I'm here, Richard." Imani's voice was so cold it could have formed frost on the receiver. The geniality in Sterling's throat dried up. "Imani, is everything all right? You sound tense." "I was," Imani replied. "About 4 hours ago, when your flight attendant, Brenda Jenkins, on flight 1109, refused to serve me a glass of water, lied to the captain claiming I was aggressive and had me forcibly, physically removed from my first-class seat by 2 airport police officers." Sterling dropped his wine glass. It shattered on the flagstone patio. What did you say? There must be a mistake, a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, Richard. I am currently on a private jet provided by your competitor, Aerosphere. I am looking at a bruise on my wrist from an officer named Frank Russo. I am looking at a video of my own humiliation. And I am looking at a $200 goodwill voucher your automated system sent me for my inconvenience." Sterling was choking. "Imani, my God, I had no idea. It's horrifying. Brenda Jenkins? I'll have her fired. I'll have her fired tonight. This is not who we are. I will have the entire SFO crew suspended. Please. This is a terrible, isolated incident." "It's not, Richard. My team has already pulled her file. She has a documented history of passenger complaints, particularly from minorities. You knew she was a problem. You kept her employed. You are liable." "Liable? Imani, let's not talk about liability. Let's talk about fixing this," Sterling pleaded, his voice now high and strained. He was pacing, frantic. "I'll fly to New York myself. I will meet you at the tarmac. I will publicly apologize. We'll make a joint statement. We'll donate $10 million to a charity of your choice. Whatever you want, Imani. Just, let's not be hasty about the agreement. We're partners." There was a long, terrible silence on the line. When Imani spoke, she was no longer a victim or even an angry customer. She was an executioner. "We are not partners, Richard. You and I will never be in the same room again. That's the first thing. The second is this. At 6 a.m. tomorrow, the Wall Street Journal is running a story. It will detail my assault. It will include the audio of your employee lying. It will include a photo of my injury. And it will include a screenshot of your $200 insult. Third," she continued, as Sterling made a small, strangled sound, That story will also contain an announcement that Hayes Vanguard has terminated all negotiations with Transcontinental, citing a systemic, dangerous, and discriminatory corporate culture that puts our employees at risk. No, Imani, you can't. That's $5 billion. That's not a penalty, that's an execution. You'll bankrupt us. I believe the technical term is karma, Richard. And finally, Imani said, the article will also feature a joint press release from myself and James Thatcher. Hayes Vanguard is moving the entire $5 billion consortium contract to Aerosphere Airlines, effective immediately. We signed the preliminary agreement 30 minutes ago. James was kind enough to lend me this plane. Richard Sterling collapsed into a patio chair. The blood had drained from his face. This wasn't a problem to be solved. This was a catastrophe he couldn't survive. Imani, please, he whispered. You don't know what you're doing. This will destroy the company. It will wipe out our shareholders. It will cost 20,000 people their jobs. For one rude flight attendant? For one rude flight attendant that you enabled, Imani corrected him. For one captain who didn't ask a single question. For 2 police officers who assaulted a passenger. For a corporate culture that saw a black woman in first class and automatically assumed she was the problem. You didn't just lose this contract because of Brenda, Richard. You lost it because when I told you what happened, your first instinct was to offer me money and a sacrifice. You didn't offer me justice. You didn't ask what was right. You just tried to put a price tag on my dignity. The price, Imani concluded, is $5 billion. Have a lovely evening. She hung up. Richard Sterling sat in the dark, the shattered glass of his celebration at his feet. He was a dead man. He just hadn't stopped breathing yet. In the cabin of the G650, Imani closed her phone. She felt no joy, no triumph, just the cold, grim satisfaction of a necessary amputation. The rot had been identified, and it had been cut out. The 6 a.m. EST news alerts did not just land, they detonated. In a darkened Manhattan penthouse, a hedge fund manager named Kyle, who was already on his 3rd espresso, saw the Bloomberg alert flash on his terminal. He read it once. He read it twice. Alert, Transcontinental, $TCA, $5 billion Hayes Vanguard, $HVC, contract terminated. HVC alleges CEO assault, cites systemic discrimination. Full $5 billion contract moved to Aerosphere, $Aero. Kyle didn't wait. He didn't need analysis. He knew Imani Hayes by reputation. She didn't bluff. He knew TCA was leveraged to the sky on the promise of that contract. Sell, he barked to his team. Short dollar TCA with everything we have. They're bankrupt. They just don't know it yet. Moments later, the Wall Street Journal article by Julia Kent, the one Imani's team had so carefully packaged, went live. It was a masterpiece of corporate annihilation. It wasn't just an article. It was a dossier. It led with a juxtaposition. A $5 billion partnership, built on months of high-level negotiation, destroyed by a $2 glass of water. It had the full unedited audio from Imani's phone, which let the world hear her calm, measured tone. Officer, I am not raising my voice. Against the backdrop of Brenda's escalating agitation and Russo's immediate aggression. It had the high-resolution clinical photograph of the deep purple 3-fingered bruise on Imani's wrist, an image of shocking, tangible violence. It had the screenshot of the $200 goodwill voucher, which Kent had devastatingly captioned, Transcontinental's $200 valuation of a black CEO's dignity. And it had the 1-2 punch, Imani's official statement of termination, and James Thatcher's simultaneous triumphant, Welcome to the family press release. At 9:30 a.m., when the opening bell rang at the New York Stock Exchange, it sounded like a death knell. Transcontinental Airways stock, ticker $TCA, did not dip. It did not slide. It fell off a cliff. The high-frequency trading algorithms coded to react to keywords like fraud, termination, and insolvency kicked in. Millions of shares were dumped in microseconds. The stock, which had closed at $28.15, opened at $19. A limit-down trading halt was triggered at 9:31 a.m. It reopened at 9:36 a.m. at $14. It was halted again at 9:37 a.m. The market wasn't just reacting, it was delivering a verdict. This was a public execution. Every digital ticker in every newsroom in the world was glowing with the same blood-red number, $TCA, minus 45%. While the market was collapsing, the emergency 8 a.m. board meeting for Transcontinental was underway. It was not a meeting, it was an inquisition. Richard Sterling sat, ashen and trembling, at the head of the polished mahogany table. The board members, most of whom had dialed in via secure video, were not sympathetic. They were a grid of 12 furious, pale and terrified faces on a plasma screen, a digital firing squad. "Richard, what have you done?" It was Eleanor Vance, a legacy board member, her voice a low, disgusted whisper. "We've spent 50 years building this brand. You let it be destroyed in an hour." "Eleanor, it was a rogue employee, a single regrettable." "Don't you dare call this regrettable," bellowed Sullivan, the private equity baron. "I've got bankers screaming in my ear. Michael," he yelled, turning to the CFO, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. "Michael, explain to Richard what he's done." The CFO, Michael, licked his dry lips. "Richard, the Greenwing Initiative. We took out $2.2 billion in bonds to fund the retrofitting, all secured against the projected revenue from the Hayes contract. It's in the covenant. The material adverse change clause. With the contract terminated, the banks, they can call in the entire debt. Not in a year, in 30 days. A low moan escaped Sterling's lips. "They wouldn't." "They are," Sullivan roared. "They're filing the notice right now. We don't have $2.2 billion in liquidity. We're insolvent, you fool. You've bankrupted us." As if on cue, an aide in the boardroom pointed to the large TV tuned to CNBC. "Sir, you need to see this." On the screen was James Thatcher, CEO of Aerosphere, looking solemn, concerned, and absolutely victorious. "It's a tragedy," Thatcher was saying, his face a mask of faux sympathy. "But when Dr. Hayes, a true pioneer in her field, called me and told me her story, we knew we had to step up. At Aerosphere, our culture is our product. We are proud to announce we are not just partners with Hayes Vanguard. We are signing a new dignity and respect pledge, which will apply to every passenger on every flight." He's poaching our corporate values," Sterling stammered. "We don't have any values, Richard. That's the point," Eleanor snapped. She looked at the corporate secretary. "I call for a vote. Immediate termination of Richard Sterling as CEO and chairman of the board, for cause gross willful negligence." "Seconded," came a chorus of voices. "All in favor?" Every hand, every digital icon went up. It was unanimous. "Richard," Eleanor said, her voice now as cold and dead as the company's stock, "your employment is terminated. Your severance and golden parachute are voided for cause. Security will escort you from the building. Now." Sterling looked around, his mouth opening and closing. He was a dead man. He just hadn't stopped breathing. Two grim-faced security guards, who yesterday would have saluted him, entered the room and took him by the elbows. The last thing he heard as he was walked out of his office was Sullivan screaming at the CFO, "Call the bankruptcy lawyers. Call them now." The hard karma, however, was not just for the C-suite. It was microscopic, and it was personal. For Brenda Jenkins, she woke up at 7 a.m. Pacific time, blissfully unaware. She poured her coffee, expecting to go to work. Her phone had 300 unread text messages. She turned on the local news. Her face, a grainy, unflattering photo from an old union newsletter, was on the screen. Local flight attendant, Brenda Jenkins, at center of $5 billion corporate catastrophe. Airline Karen, the chyron read. Her phone rang. It was Frank, her union representative. "Brenda, what did you do?" he yelled. There was no solidarity in his voice, only panic. "I did my job, Frank. That woman, she was hostile." "Brenda, they have the audio. She's offering to show you her laptop. She's dead calm. and you're on tape lying to the gate agent. You said she pointed her finger in your face and was yelling. It's a lie, Brenda. You're on audio fabricating a report." There was a long silence. "Brenda," Frank said, his voice flat, "the airline fired you an hour ago, and the union, we're not touching this. We're not going to arbitration. You're on your own. You're toxic. You've just cost 20,000 people their jobs." He hung up. She gave one disastrous interview to a local news crew that afternoon, standing on her lawn in a bathrobe. "I'm the real victim here," she shrieked. "I feared for my safety. These people are always looking for a handout, always trying to sue." That clip, of course, went viral, sealing her fate as the face of belligerent, racist incompetence. She was named as a primary co-defendant in Imani's civil suit. Within 2 months, facing crushing legal fees, she had to sell her house. She was unemployable. For Officer Frank Russo, the chief of the San Francisco Airport Police Department, was in the mayor's office by 10 a.m. "You told me this guy was on a short leash," the mayor screamed, throwing a copy of the WSJ at him. "Now I've got a $1 billion civil rights lawsuit against the city, and the name Frank Russo is in every newspaper on earth. His 8 previous complaints are in the article. 8. You made us look complicit." The chief was sweating. He went back to his precinct and called in Officer Miller. Miller, young and terrified, sat in an interrogation room facing 2 stony-faced internal affairs detectives. "Russo's done," one detective said. "He's fired. The question is, are you done with him?" Miller saw his entire career, his pension, his future, about to be burned on Russo's altar. The blue wall of silence didn't seem so strong. He was amped up," Miller stammered. "I told him to wait, to talk to her on the jet bridge. He said, 'We're done talking.' He went in. He grabbed her. I just followed his lead, sir." It was all they needed. Russo was terminated by noon for a clear pattern of excessive force, conduct unbecoming, and perjury on an official report. He was indicted on assault charges a week later. His partner's testimony was the primary evidence. For the bystander in 2A, the tech bro, a senior product manager named Chad Mulligan, got to his gleaming Silicon Valley office at 9 a.m., oblivious. He sat down, opened Slack, and saw his face. A blurry shot, but unmistakably him, shrugging, next to the caption, "This alley at our company watched a black woman be assaulted and lied to help the assailants." The internal Women in Tech channel had exploded. His own team members were posting, disgusted. "This is not our culture. Coward." His VP called him into a glass-walled conference room at 10:30 a.m. "Chad," she said, her face grim. "We've seen the video. We read your quote in the journal. I don't know, man, she seemed kinda loud. You didn't just do nothing, Chad. You participated. You helped a racist flight attendant and an aggressive cop validate a lie. That is not our company's values. It's a fundamental failure of character. I didn't want to get involved. That's precisely the problem. You're fired. Your security badge is deactivated. Please leave." He was fired not for a crime, but for a fatal, public, and viral failure of basic human decency. The karma was swift, brutal, and utterly comprehensive. The execution was complete. A corporation cannot feel shame. It can only bleed money. And in the 30 days following what the press had dubbed the $5 billion slap, Transcontinental Airways was hemorrhaging from 1,000 self-inflicted wounds. The fall was not a single, clean event. It was an agonizing, public collapse, played out in the cold, unforgiving arenas of the stock market, the bankruptcy courts, and the now desolate airport terminals. Michael Vance, the company's longtime chief financial officer, had been given the poison chalice promotion to interim CEO. His job was not to save the company. That was impossible. His job was to preside over its funeral. He sat in Richard Sterling's old office, a cavernous room that now felt like a mausoleum, staring at the live feed of TCA's terminal at SFO. It was a ghost town. Where there should have been a teeming river of passengers, there were only a few dozen scattered, confused-looking people. The check-in kiosks were dark. The first-class lounge was locked. A gate agent, a 20-year veteran named Clara, stood at the podium for Flight 408 to Chicago. Her screen showed 18 passengers booked on a 220-seat Airbus. An hour ago, a man had tried to use one of the $200 Goodwill vouchers TCA's automated system had frantically emailed to all its frequent flyers. When his booking was rejected, the vouchers having been voided in the liquidity crisis, he had screamed at her, "This whole airline is a scam." Clara, who had once worn her red and blue uniform with pride, now just felt a creeping, cold shame. This wasn't her fault. It was Brenda's. It was Sterling's. It was the fault of a management structure that had ignored years of complaints about that SFO crew, the ones who acted like petty tyrants. Now, 22,000 employees were paying the price for the arrogance of a few. The true execution, however, was happening in a sterile conference room in Delaware. "The covenant is clear, Michael." The voice on the speakerphone was cold, belonging to the lead counsel for the banking consortium that held TCA's $2.2 billion in debt. The Hayes Vanguard contract was listed as the primary collateral and a material condition for the Green Wing bond series. That contract is not just void. It has been publicly and hostilely transferred to a competitor. You are in material default. "Please," Vance whispered, his head in his hands. "We'll be profitable again by Q3. Profitable? The banker actually laughed, a short, barking sound. "Michael, your stock is at $2.14. Your forward bookings are down 73%. Your brand is radioactive. No corporation will put their employees on a TCA flight for fear of a lawsuit or a PR nightmare. You are not a business. You are a liability. The note is due in full. You have 30 days to pay, or we seize your assets." The line clicked. 30 days. It was a 30-day death sentence. Simultaneously in New York, the second front of the war was reaching its conclusion. Imani's chief legal officer, David Leone, sat across from TCA's exhausted, shell-shocked legal team. The civil lawsuit for assault, battery, false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and racial discrimination was unwinnable for TCA. The audio, the video, the bruise, the files on Russo and Brenda. It was an open and shut case. "My client has no interest in a drawn-out trial," David said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. TCA's lead lawyer, a man who hadn't slept in a week, looked at it. He was expecting a number, a personal damages claim. $50 million, $100 million. "This," he stammered, confused. "This isn't a damages claim. This is a charter for a non-profit." "Correct," David said. "Dr. Hayes is not interested in your money. She doesn't need it, but she is interested in justice, and she is interested in consequences. You are going to take the entirety of your corporate insurance policy's payout for this incident. We've assessed it at a minimum of $100 million, and you are going to wire it to fund this new entity." "The Hayes Dignity Fund." "Precisely," David said, a thin, cruel smile playing on his lips. "It is a legal aid foundation. Its sole purpose will be to identify, fund, and prosecute cases of consumer discrimination. For every person of color followed in a store, for every passenger unjustly removed from a flight, for every customer refused service. They will now have a legal team with a $100 million war chest. Dr. Hayes has decided that since you are so proficient at creating victims, you can pay for their legal representation. You are not just going to compensate her. You are going to fund the legal army that ensures what you did to her can never be done to anyone else without devastating financial consequence." The TCA lawyer just stared. It was the most brilliant, ruthless, and terrifyingly just legal maneuver he had ever seen. They were being forced to purchase the gun that would be permanently pointed at the head of their entire industry. We agree," he whispered. It was the last significant check Transcontinental Airways would ever write. On the 31st day, the bell tolled. In a Delaware bankruptcy court, a judge's gavel fell with a dull, final thud. Upon review of the petitions and the inability of the debtor to meet its financial obligations, This court hereby orders Transcontinental Airways Inc. dissolved. The petition for Chapter 11 reorganization is denied. The motion for Chapter 7 liquidation is approved. The U.S. trustee shall begin immediate liquidation of all assets. It was over. The headlines were stark. End of an era. Transcontinental Airways to be dissolved. TCA's 80-year history wiped out by $5 billion karma incident. Grounded 22,000 jobs lost in TCA collapse. In the pilot's lounge at LAX, Captain Don Evans, a 30-year veteran, slowly packed a cardboard box. He took his TCA wings, the ones he had earned with 10,000 hours of perfect flying, and looked at them. He thought of his pension, now a worthless piece of paper. He thought of his co-pilot, a young father of 2, who was sobbing in the corner. And he thought of Brenda Jenkins. The name was poison. He remembered the memos, the complaints, the internal whispers that management had HR'd away for years because her union rep was a bulldog. All this ruin, because one bitter, hateful woman couldn't fetch a glass of water. He wasn't mad at Imani Hayes. He was furious at the rot she had exposed. He dropped his wings into the trash can and walked out, never looking back. The vultures descended the next day. The liquidation auction was a feeding frenzy. James Thatcher, CEO of Aerosphere, was the apex predator. From his Chicago office, he calmly outbid everyone for TCA's most valuable assets, their coveted gates at JFK, SFO, and London Heathrow, their 15 newest 787 Dreamliners, their international routes to Asia. He bought it all for 30 cents on the dollar. He was not just taking his rival's business, he was picking over its corpse, and he did it with a smile. 6 months later, the cover of Forbes magazine showed Imani Hayes. She was not in a boardroom. She was standing on the tarmac in front of a gleaming new Aerosphere A350. The headline was not subtle. The reckoning, Imani Hayes didn't just win. She changed the rules. How one CEO turned a humiliation into a revolution, and a $100 million weapon. The Hayes Dignity Fund was already a force. It had filed 50 lawsuits on behalf of aggrieved customers across the country. The Imani lawsuit, as it was now known, had become a verb in corporate training. A new generation of managers was being taught that the cost of discrimination was no longer a small, quiet settlement. It was extinction. Imani herself was on that same A350, flying from New York to London. She walked past the main cabin, her briefcase in hand. Near the galley, she saw a new young flight attendant, a black woman, being gently corrected on her service technique by a senior purser. "No, dear," the purser said kindly. "We always present the glass on a tray. Our standards are what set us apart." The young woman nodded, corrected her posture, and smiled. Imani smiled too. A healthy system. She settled into seat 2B. The plane was different, but the seat was the same. She looked out the window. On the fuselage, just below the cockpit, was a new small logo, a green leaf with the words, "Powered by Hayes Vanguard Capital." Her sustainable fuel was now powering her new exclusive airline partner. A different flight attendant approached, a man in his 40s with a warm, professional smile. "Dr. Hayes, it is a genuine honor to have you on board. My name is Thomas. Can I get you anything before we push back? Champagne, a sparkling water, perhaps?" Imani looked up from her laptop. The moment hung in the air, a tiny, perfect echo. "Hello, Thomas," she said, her voice calm and light. "I would love a sparkling water with a lime." "Right away, doctor," he said. He returned less than 60 seconds later, holding a chilled crystal glass on a small silver tray. "Thank you, Thomas," she said. "My pleasure," he replied. "My sister-in-law, Clara, actually. She used to be a gate agent at SFO. For TCA. She's with us now in operations. She asked me to say thank you. You saved her." Imani looked at him, truly seeing him. The 22,000 jobs. Not all were lost. The good ones, the professionals like Clara, like Thomas, had been absorbed by Aerosphere and others. The rot had been excised and the healthy tissue had been saved. "Tell her I said you're welcome." Imani said softly. As the plane, powered by her fuel, pushed back from the gate that used to belong to her enemy, Imani Hayes took a long, slow sip of her water. It was cold, it was crisp, and it was, finally, just water. She opened her laptop and got back to work. Miles away, in the SFO International Terminal, the late-night quiet was broken by the sound of a janitorial floor buffer. The woman pushing it wore a gray jumpsuit and a hairnet. She stopped for a moment, wiping sweat from her brow, and looked out the massive window. She watched the Aerosphere 350, the Spirit of Vanguard, lift gracefully into the night sky, its green logo illuminated. Brenda Jenkins stared until the light was just another star. Then she picked up her mop and turned back to the long, dirty hallway. The airport was the only place that would hire her, and she would spend the rest of her life cleaning up other people's messes, forever grounded. In the end, this was never about a glass of water. It was about respect. Transcontinental Airways believed that one passenger's dignity was worthless. Imani Hayes proved that it was worth everything. Their company, their CEO, their abusive staff. They weren't just punished. They were erased. They learned the hard way that you cannot put a price tag on human dignity, but you can and will pay the cost for violating it. And that cost? $5 billion and a one-way ticket to bankruptcy. What do you think? Was this the ultimate play stupid games, win stupid prizes moment? Or was the collapse of an entire airline too high a price to pay? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love stories of real-life justice and hard karma, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more stories where the receipt is always, always cashed.